You are standing behind a wall built out of food, sacks of maize, each one weighing about 200 pounds, stacked chest high across a farmyard in southern Africa, still warm from a long summer day. It is the afternoon of the 22nd of January, 1879. An hour ago, this place was the dullest posting in the war, a supply depot with a small hospital in it, sitting beside a river crossing nobody back home had heard of. Then two horsemen came down the wagon road at a gallop, their horses lathered, shouting that the main British column had been wiped out that morning, that a Zulu army was coming this way, and that there was nothing at all between it and you. You are one of about 150 men. More than 30 of them cannot stand up. Somewhere behind the hill at your back, hidden by the slope, are between 3,000 and 4,000 of the best infantry on the continent, and you have just decided not to run. Freeze that farmyard for a moment, before the first shot. By sunrise tomorrow, 11 of the men standing in it will have been recommended for the Victoria Cross, the highest award for bravery that Britain can give. It is the most ever given for a single action, and it has never been matched. The story of this night will be told so loudly and for so long that it ends up hiding something. Because the reason an empire suddenly needed heroes, that January had happened 10 miles away, that same morning, and it was the worst defeat a modern European army had ever suffered at the hands of an enemy armed mostly with spears. So there are really two questions here. How did 150 men in a farmyard survive a night that should have killed every one of them? And why did their own government need them to survive it so badly? Start with the ground under your boots. The place is called Rorke's Drift. A drift is simply a ford, a shallow stretch of river where wagons and oxen can cross without a bridge, and this one crosses the Buffalo River, known to the Zulu as the Mzinyathi. It is the border. On one bank, the British colony of Natal. On the other, the Kingdom of Zululand. The farm was built by an Irish trader named James Rorke, and after his death, his widow sold it to a Swedish mission. There are two buildings, single-story, mud brick, thatched. The old farmhouse is now a storehouse packed with supplies. The old chapel is now a hospital, holding men laid up with fever, dysentery, and broken bones. That is the entire garrison. B Company of the 24th Regiment of Foot, a few engineers, a commissary officer, a surgeon, a chaplain, and 30-odd sick men who were supposed to be recovering somewhere safe. Why is there a war at all? Not because London ordered one. The senior British official in the region, Sir Bartle Frere, wanted the independent African kingdoms folded into a single British confederation, and the Zulu kingdom was the largest obstacle to that plan. In December of 1878, he sent King Cetshwayo an ultimatum demanding, among other things, that the king disband his army, the institution his entire kingdom was organized around. It was written to be refused, and it was refused, and Frere did not wait for approval from his own government before acting on it. On the 11th of January 1879, Lord Chelmsford led a British column across this very river, past this very farmyard, and invaded. 11 days later, the invasion had gone catastrophically wrong. You should also know exactly who is coming, because the caricature is wrong. The Zulu army is not a mob with sticks. It is a standing military system, organized into regiments called Amabutho, formed by age group, drilled, and capable of covering 50 miles in a day on foot, and then fighting at the end of it. Their principal weapon is the ikwa, a short stabbing spear with a broad blade, designed for close work behind a large cowhide shield. The standard maneuver is called the horns of the buffalo. The strongest regiments form the chest and hit you head-on, while two horns of younger, faster men sweep wide on the flanks to get behind you and close the trap. It has worked on everything Southern Africa has thrown at it for 60 years. That morning, it worked on the British Army. That morning is called Isandlwana. Chelmsford divided his force and went off chasing what he believed was the main Zulu army, leaving the camp unentrenched and its wagons not drawn into a defensive circle, against the standing advice of everyone who had ever fought in that country. Around 20,000 Zulu warriors, concealed in a valley a few miles away, came over the ridge in the horns of the buffalo and destroyed it. Roughly 1,300 men on the British side were killed. It also had a practical consequence that is about to matter enormously to you. The Zulu army did not only take the camp, it took the camp's weapons. Over 1,000 modern breech-loading rifles and boxes of ammunition walked away from Isandlwana in Zulu hands. Which brings the two horsemen down your road. They are survivors, and they do not stay. They deliver the news and ride on into Natal, and you can hardly blame them. The senior officer at the drift is a lieutenant of the Royal Engineers named John Chard, who came to repair the ferry pontoons and is now, by 3 years' seniority on the commission list, in command of a battle. The company commander is Lieutenant Gonville Bromhead. The obvious plan, the sane plan, is to load the sick into the ox wagons and get everyone back toward the nearest garrison, and they begin to prepare for exactly that. It is a commissary officer who stops them. James Dalton is an acting assistant commissary, a supply man, which is to say, a clerk with stores to account for, but he had served 20 years in the ranks before that, and he understands something the two young lieutenants have not worked through. An ox wagon travels at walking pace. Men with fever and broken legs cannot run. And a Zulu regiment can march faster than any of it. Leave, and by dusk you are strung out across 10 miles of open road with no cover, and the horns of the buffalo will roll that column up from both ends like a carpet. Stay, and you have walls, and you have rifles. It is not a choice between safety and danger. It is a choice between dying in the open and possibly living behind something. They decide to stay and build. So you start stacking food. Mealies are maize, corn, the staple of the region, and the depot is stuffed with them, bagged for the invasion that has just ceased to exist. Each sack takes 2 men to lift and lands with a heavy dead thump. Alongside them go wooden biscuit boxes, about 100 pounds each, jammed together into a low rampart running from the storehouse to the hospital and tied into a natural shelf of rock along one side. Men knock loopholes through the hospital walls with pickaxes so the patients' rooms can be fired from. Doors are barricaded with furniture and mattresses. The chaplain, George Smith, moves along the line handing out ammunition. You have perhaps 2 hours. It is farm labor done very fast by frightened men, and at the end of it you have a wall of groceries and a firing line. Then your numbers collapse. A body of allied African troops and a detachment of mounted men look at the situation, do the arithmetic, and leave. In a few minutes, the garrison drops to roughly 150, of whom 35 are patients, and the perimeter you just built is far too long for the men left to hold it. So Chard has a second wall raised, an inner line of biscuit boxes cutting the yard in half. It is an admission written in wooden crates. If the outer wall goes, and it probably will, there is somewhere to fall back to. At about 4:30 in the afternoon, they come around the shoulder of the hill. The first regiment to arrive is roughly 600 strong, and it does not pause to consider anything. It comes at the south wall at a run. You are firing a Martini Henry, a single-shot rifle loaded by dropping a lever behind the trigger guard, which flips the breech open to take one fat brass cartridge at a time. It fires a soft lead bullet, nearly ½ an inch across, and it hits like a hammer. A trained man gets off 12 aimed rounds a minute, and every man on that wall is trained. The first volleys go out at 400 yards, and the front of the charge comes apart, and the rest keeps coming, and 40 seconds later they are at the sacks. Now the wall shows you what it is worth. It is chest high, and that is the whole story of the next 10 hours. To reach you with a stabbing spear, a Zulu warrior has to get his body up over the top of a 200-pound sack of grain, while a soldier with a rifle and a 22-inch bayonet stands on the other side of it. What follows is not a battle in any tidy sense. It is a shoving match with blades, across a barricade of breakfast, for hours, with both sides close enough to hear each other breathe. Men are pulled bodily over the sacks and killed on the other side. Others grab spear shafts with their bare hands. The line bends, holds, and then the shooting starts from behind you. Rising above the station is a rocky hill the soldiers call the Oscarsberg, and its terraces look straight down into your yard. Zulu marksmen are up there, and a good number of them are firing Martini Henry rifles, the same weapon you are holding, taken that morning from dead men of your own regiment at Isandlwana. Their sights are set wrong, and most of the rounds go high. Most is not all. The majority of your dead tonight will be hit from that hill. It is not a metaphor, it is just what happened. The men killed in the morning are shooting at the men still alive in the evening. The hospital is the flaw in the whole design, and everybody knows it. It is a row of small rooms that mostly open outward rather than into each other, so a man inside one room cannot reach the next without stepping into the open. It sits at the far end of the perimeter, hardest to support, and it has a thatched roof. At some point in the early evening, the thatch catches, and the building begins to burn with 30-odd sick men inside it. What happens next is the reason this story is worth telling at all. Nobody orders the hospital abandoned. The men in it are patients, and the promise a soldier makes to a man who cannot walk is the oldest promise there is. So Private Henry Hook, Private John Williams, and Privates William and Robert Jones start digging. One man holds a doorway with a bayonet, while the other hacks at the mud brick partition wall with a pickaxe, and when the hole is big enough, they drag a patient through it, and then they do it again in the next room, and again in the next, working the length of a burning building, one wall at a time, while the roof comes down in pieces above them. A man with a broken leg is pulled through a gap barely wide enough for shoulders. Others are lifted out of a high window and carried across open ground to the storehouse. Some men do die in that building, and it is worth saying so plainly. But most of them are alive because 4 privates decided the hospital was not going to be a place where the army left people. By now, the outer wall is beyond holding. The order goes out to abandon it and fall back to the biscuit boxes, and then, in the middle of the yard, under fire, exhausted men build one more thing. They stack the remaining mealie bags into a redoubt, a small square tower of grain sacks 2 bags high, with a firing step inside it, and the worst of the wounded laid in the middle. It takes muscle nobody has left, and when you climb onto it and put your rifle over the top, you understand something about where you are. You crossed an ocean to invade a kingdom, and tonight you are standing inside a fort made out of the food you were sent here to guard, shooting at men defending the country you walked into. The night goes on for a very long time. The burning hospital lights the whole yard, which is a mixed gift, because it lets you see them coming and it lets them see you standing there. Rifle barrels foul with black powder until the levers stick, and get so hot that men wrap rags around their hands to hold them. Around 20,000 rounds are fired at that post before it is over. Attacks come in waves, 4 hours of them, 5, 6, each one rolling out of the dark against the boxes, and between the waves there is shouting from both sides across 30 feet of ground. Nobody sleeps. Nobody is relieved, there is no reserve, because everyone is on the wall. By 4 in the morning, the attacks begin to thin. Consider the other side of that barricade for a moment. Those regiments had already marched 20 miles that day. They had not eaten, they had no water. They had spent a night attacking a fortified position without artillery and, as it happens, without permission, on foot, in the dark, into rifle fire, again and again. That is not the behavior of a mob. Around dawn, they gather their wounded and go. The silence that follows is worse than the noise, because nobody believes it. At about 7, a Zulu force appears on the hills again, and the men on the redoubt, too tired to be properly afraid, stand up to do it all a second time. It watches them and withdraws. Not long after, Chelmsford's relief column comes into view down the road. The Battle of Rorke's Drift is over, 11 hours or so after the first volley. The count is 17 defenders dead and 15 wounded. Around 350 Zulu bodies are counted around the post. And here the story has a part the retellings usually leave out, so let us not. In the hours after the fight, wounded Zulu warriors found in the grass around the station were killed. It is recorded in the letters of British soldiers who were there, without much embarrassment, because the men had just spent a night in a burning yard and were in no mood to be merciful. History that only flatters is not history. It is advertising. In daylight, the wall looks like what it always was. Bags split open along the top, grain spilled and trodden into the dirt, mixed with ash from the hospital and with worse things. Men sit against it because they cannot stand, and some are asleep within a minute of sitting down. And then, because they have not eaten in a day and a night, they open the burst sacks and boil the maize for breakfast. The wall goes back to being food. The men do not go back to being who they were. Now the second question, the one about why the story got so loud. The news of Isandlwana reached London and detonated. A confident empire had lost 1,300 men in a single morning to an African kingdom it had invaded without permission from its own government, and somebody was going to have to answer for it. Rorke's Drift arrived in the newspapers at exactly the right moment, and it was everything the disaster was not. Small, comprehensible, defensive, and won. 11 Victoria Crosses were awarded, along with 5 Distinguished Conduct Medals for the defense of a farmyard. Historians such as Saul David and Ian Knight have pointed out the obvious about that number. No other action has ever produced anything like it, and a government facing an inquiry into a catastrophe was very glad to have a victory to hang beside it. That takes nothing away from what the men did behind those sacks. It does change what the story was used for. They defended a wall for 11 hours, and were then handed an empire's embarrassment to carry for the rest of their lives. The Zulu side deserves the same honesty. The force that attacked you was the reserve of the army from Isandlwana, commanded by Prince Dabulamanzi, a half-brother of King Cetshwayo. They had missed the great victory that morning and wanted their share of it, but Cetshwayo had given clear instructions before the war. Do not cross into Natal, and do not attack the white man in his prepared positions. Dabulamanzi did both. The king understood, better than his commanders, what shape this war had to take if his kingdom was going to survive it. And the deeper irony sits on the other side of that coin, because Isandlwana, the greatest victory in Zulu history, was also the thing that guaranteed the kingdom's destruction. Britain could not let it stand. Reinforcements poured in, and by July the Zulu army was broken at Ulundi, and the kingdom carved into pieces. The men on your wall won a night. The men in front of it lost a country. We know all this because the participants wrote it down. Chard filed his official report, and later wrote a longer account at the personal request of Queen Victoria. Henry Hook, the private with the pickaxe, gave his own account of the hospital years afterwards. On the Zulu side, oral testimony from men who fought in the war was collected decades later by the colonial official James Stewart, whose archive is the reason Zulu voices exist in this story at all, rather than only British ones. One last note on how memory works. The famous 1964 film about this battle put Hook on screen as a drunken malingerer. In life, he was a teetotaler and a model soldier, and his family are said to have walked out of the premiere. Even the stories we tell to honor men have a habit of rewriting them. You are standing behind a wall built out of food on the afternoon of the 22nd of January, 1879, listening to two horsemen tell you that 1,300 men died this morning and that you are next. In a few minutes, you will start stacking sacks of maize, because that is all there is. Tonight, you will fight across those sacks for 11 hours and build a second wall out of them when the first one fails. And in the morning, you will eat what is left of the wall for breakfast. Politicians will decide what it meant. Medals will be struck, a film will be made, and 150 years later, people will still argue about the number of crosses. None of that is what you were doing here. You were not defending an empire, and you were not making history. You were defending the man on your left, and the 30 men behind you who could not stand up.